Hey, comic book fans, Pete here, and I'm in my bathroom in my bedroom. It's weird. My wife and my older daughter have been on vacation, and I'm trying to not let my little daughter wake up right now. So hopefully this won't cut out. But in his basement, his sexy Autobot-filled Decepticon basement, is Mr. Brian Coors Hair. How you doing tonight, my friend?
Doing good. Feeling better.
I said tonight it is like 8 o'clock in the morning. It's already kind of fucked up. Like one of the problems with my wife on vacation too is I'm responsible for the dogs, and like one of them just came and woke me up at like 6:30, and I'm like, it's fucking Sunday, asshole. Like I don't have to go to work, you know.
Um,
Um, anyway, we should probably tell people what we're here to do. We are here to cover the second half of our Umbrella Academy season 3 review. We're going to break it down into weeks, but then Paper Girls just showed up and dumped about 8 episodes on our lap. So we are actually covering Umbrella Academy season 3, episodes 4 through 10. So you got this in you, Brian? You can do it?
I hope so. I was actually taking like a ton of notes like during the show,
Yeah.
and I don't think they would be super useful for like our conversation because there's more like this happened and this happened, but hopefully that'll keep me going here with some extra little facts here and there.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you guys are new to our channel, usually Brian and I cover like an episode of a show, and we do like detailed notes of specific episodes. But this we're covering, 7 episodes of the show. So um, even when I was writing these notes up, I was like, there's no way we can cover every little detail.
Yeah,
So
I mean, and part of the other impetus of this is that we were only supposed to do 3 episodes, and then one night I was just watching them, and I just kept going, and I'm like, Pete, how many did you watch? Could we do more? And
yeah,
then it just turned out we couldn't record on Wednesday, and then we just decided to do the whole thing.
yeah. So that's the question I kind of wanted to say for the end, but I'm very curious. You kept watching more because you were enjoying it, and you thought like, oh, this is good stuff. I got need more.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, okay. See, because for me, and here's a little bit of a spoiler, I kind of feel like the show it's like really strong in the middle, and then the two ends of this 3 season run are pretty weak. And I think that like if you go from like maybe the first or second episode, maybe even the first episode of the second season up until maybe like the first or second episode of this season,
Yeah.
it's real strong, and then it just sort of peters out. I feel.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
I was really enjoying it, and I didn't want to stop, honestly.
Okay, okay. Well,
But you
maybe
know what?
as
You
go ahead.
also have the context of watching the entire series in a very short time span. Like I haven't watched season 2 in 2 years.
Oh yeah.
It's like the formula they use is a little fresher to me again, I guess.
hmm hmm Yeah, well, do you feel like this show is like any other show that you've watched or binged?
I feel like it takes elements from other shows. I mean, obviously, it has some superhero aspects because they have powers. Maybe you can equate that to like heroes or something like that.
Yes.
Um, I mean, actually, you could probably equate a lot of this to heroes, to be perfectly honest.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I feel like it it it's more interesting to me. The heroes is a little weirder, I guess. Like I feel like heroes tried to be more dark and gritty,
Yeah.
as opposed to this is a little kind of like goofy and weird and
Yeah.
a little more out there. I think.
I totally agree. I mean, Heroes, I feel like is sort of like X-Men light, or like, oh, it's X-Men, but with like real people, right?
Yeah.
And they're not wearing costumes. And this is sort of like, okay, well, now we're heroes, but we're based on this really out there, weird comic by Gerard Way, but it's like a watered down version of that. And
Yeah. It's almost like a comparison of like X Men comics to the first X Men movie, where it is sort of watered down a bit. Everyone's wearing the same costumes and all that. It is a little more human than and less melodramatic than the comics.
yeah,
So yeah, that works to me.
and here's going to be a comparison you might not like. I was just thinking about how many similarities it has to Jupiter's Legacy, the Netflix show.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Um.
because oh, good.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, no, like if you think about it, there's that whole thing about the reset button to reality that we're going to get to in our discussion, and there's the tattoo and the symbols that are in the Hotel Oblivion, and And that just kind of reminds me of them going to that island in Jupiter's Legacy and getting the power from there. And it seems like their power is somehow connected to this reset button too.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know why. To me, it's more interesting in this series to me than it was in Jupiter's Legacy.
I mean,
they haven't,
yeah,
they haven't given, like, I feel like they haven't really attempted to give us much of that backstory here yet, and I think I want to give them the benefit of the doubt with explaining it further. And I think with the teasers we got for the very end of the episode, it seems like we will get that if we get a fourth season.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Jupiter's Legacy, the alien aspect to it felt like an afterthought and something they didn't want to have to explain.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in this they might actually explain it, and it might be worthwhile in some way. I mean, maybe it falls on its face. Who knows? We've mentioned before this is based on a comic, and the comic ended, the third volume of the comic ended in, like, I guess 2019, 2018, something like that. And there has not been, it might even been earlier than that. And there has not been a volume 4 yet. Volume 4 is supposed to be called The Sparrow Academy. We see the Sparrow Academy at the end of volume 3. It is more than just the last page too. I was wrong about that.
Yeah.
But it's very possible that stuff we saw this season on the TV show may be covered in that, or it may totally be divergent. Who knows?
Well, season 4 that you mentioned, is there any talks of making a season 4 of the show?
Not yet. But Netflix typically waits a month or two after a season drops to announce a renewal, unless it's like a mega blockbuster like Stranger Things, and generally it's like, oh yeah, we're coming back, don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But there aren't many examples of shows like that on Netflix. I don't think that they would immediately tell you, hey, yes, don't worry. I think the chances are good. I think the show does better than you'd expect it to.
Yeah.
Like you said, on the last episode, I think it was like the most watched show in with season 1 of that year on Netflix.
So. I believe so, yeah.
And that's kind of crazy to me. I've heard like no one talk about this show. I do know a few people that watched it this time though.
Okay.
Unlike Jupiter's Legacy. There's that. I mean, you know what? The true test of it is have you seen anyone online randomly talk about it? And the answer to that is yes, I have.
Yeah.
So there is a fan base somewhere, and hopefully someone that has seen the show is seeing this, even though we're late with the review.
Right. Yeah, all 12 people that watch our show, at least one of them likes Umbrella Academy. But I was going to say, and I think I never mentioned this in any of our reviews, but one point I wanted to make from watching this show is I feel like a short story of prose, adapts well into a feature film. I feel like a comic book trade adapts well into a feature film. I think that like where we start to get problems are a TV series, I think only really works when it's based on a novel. And I feel like if you try to take one comic book trade, not like multiple trades, but just one, and stretch it out over a season of a show, I feel like that's when it gets like, you're like, okay, can we get to the point? And I think that like only when you have like a long novel does that work as a TV show.
I'm going to slightly disagree here. Is that I think a comic book trade, I think generally speaking, a movie is too short of a time span for most trades, given the passage of time in each thing it is. If it's like something that particularly takes place in a day or a few hours or something like that, or it's one event or something like that, that makes sense there. But a trade usually takes place, it seems like it's days or weeks or something like that. And I don't think that translates well to a movie all the time. But I also will agree with you that sometimes it doesn't translate well to a TV show either, because they feel the need to stretch it out so much to pad it a little more. You have to consider everyone working on the show. They want to get their money's worth for people they're paying to do their jobs, and they want to get actors equal parts to make them interested in wanting to, so they get quality actors. So they have to pad things out to give people, priority. So I don't think there is necessary. I guess what I'm saying is there really isn't a perfect way to translate a comic book into another media form yet.
Except animation. Seems like animation is.
Yeah. Fair enough.
uh, but so that's kind of a point I want to get to, and I actually have notes that we've written and we're going to go over. But one point that I want to get to is I feel like the show kind of blows its load in the first few episodes, and then they try to kind of connect it to this bigger like master plan by the end of the season. But really, I felt like the most compelling, interesting stuff was the stuff with the sparrows. And once you get to these later episodes of the season, like a lot of them are dead.
Yeah.
And I just think you could really play off a lot with the two groups. And it's like they kind of quickly just kind of dispatch the sparrows.
Yeah, I think that one of the they made it seem like the sparrows were going to be this big important thing, and while they were more a plot device than anything else here. I think,
Right.
and I think, and the story overall across the show takes a lot of left turns.
Yeah.
And it seems kind of weird. It doesn't feel like a naturally not the pacing, but naturally plotted in the same direction. It's like you're supposed to be caring and be interested in this, but no, we're going to turn here, and what you thought was going to be happening is completely different, and that doesn't actually matter.
Right.
So the sparrows didn't really matter here at all. I guess with the exception of Sloane, because she stuck around the whole show, and maybe arguably Ben. But it's like, when we got to what episode did they close the Kugelblitz? Was it 7 or 8? I don't remember.
I think
I guess it doesn't even matter, honestly, but it was 7 or 8, and they closed it, and you would think that that's the natural conclusion of the season because that's what they were going for. But no, it keeps going for 3 episodes or 2 episodes or something like that, to something different.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just that was a left turn. I mean, I kind of did like where they ended up going, I guess overall, but they definitely put expectations in your mind, and I think they changed your mind throughout the show.
Yeah. The left turn comment, you're on the money there, where it's just like, you think it's going this way, and whoop, we're going this way. And I believe it is episode 7, because I think there's like the wedding, then there's like we got to do something, and then there's the final episode. So I think there's like 3 after they close that Kugelblitz or contain it. But the Kugelblitz brings us to our first note that we have here on our list. Essentially, like the sparrows, like you said, we thought they were like going to be the main threat or like the big issue to deal with this season. Just like there's always been some kind of threat, right? There was the apocalypse in the first season. We find out it's connected to Vanya. Then in the second season, there's the idea that World War III is going to happen. There's going to be this nuclear apocalypse. In this, the apocalypse that's brought on is this Kugelblitz. And I just wanted to know what you thought of as a threat.
This is where like the format of the show, or the format how they plot out the show comes into play here, where I mentioned before that you probably like, I've seen this already, this idea already, like, oh, there's these goofballs that kind of have powers, they don't really do anything, they fight, they have infighting, and they have to stop an apocalypse, and that sums up all 3 seasons of this show. So it's definitely repetitive, but just general comic book reasoning, you have to escalate everything. So if they were just going to blow up the earth the first time, and then they were going to blow up a different reality, I don't know, it wasn't even different. This is going to be another nuclear holocaust. So I guess that's not much of an escalation there. And then now they're blowing up all of reality.
Like in the second season, it was essentially the idea that, we made the apocalypse happen earlier. Now it's going to happen in the 60s, and everything that would have happened afterwards wouldn't happen. But it's kind of like the same thing over and over again, the same kind of pattern each season. And I think that I like the first season, the apocalypse from that one, because it's like, this is very much like the comic, right? Like Vanya is the cause of the apocalypse in the comic, right?
Yeah.
Then in season 2, they really, really go into detail about each character's experience in the early 60s. They're like, okay, this is Klaus's life. This is Allison's life. And so you really get invested in their lives. And then the idea of that ending is, it's interesting, because it's like, okay, they have to stop this because this is their personal timeline. Then by the third season, it's like, well, they're in another timeline that they never even existed in, and reality is going to get destroyed. And I think the visual part of the threat, like the way that the Kugel Blitz worked, was like interesting because it would like shoot out a blast and just kind of push people, and then when it gets sucked in, that's when it would obliterate people. I think that was cool. However, it was never really handled like, oh my god, this is so scary. And so one thing I want to point out too is that we're going to talk spoilers in this review. So if you haven't seen this season of Umbrella Academy, go watch it, come back. But like at one point, like Stan, like the adopted kid of Diego and Lila, this kid that they're watching, he just gets obliterated by the Kugel Blitz, and it's not treated with the same kind of gravity.
Yeah,
like
that's one of those left turn kind of things I was thinking. I think another example of that too is what happens with Harlan. It matters for like 2 seconds and then it just doesn't anymore.
Yeah, and that kind of is a point in our questions I kind of wanted to bring up down the road, but I think it's like something that's worth discussing because with this show, there's like two different ways they handle death and tragedy, right? For certain characters, it's like a big deal, like emotional stuff that happens to Vanya / Victor, because Vanya in the beginning of the show and then Victor by the third season, and stuff that happens to Allison. It's all very, very serious, right? Like Allison, she has this activist husband in the second season, and they go through this like horrible, realistic, racist stuff. And she doesn't have her child in the third season, and it's like the idea of my child was never born, right? And all the stuff with Victor and like his love interest in the second season, and then like what kind of comes out of that, it's very, very serious. Then you have like Luther and Klaus and Diego, and it's all like goofy. And if anything violent ever happens to any of them, it's always a joke. And so it's like, because it's not like across the board, like, oh, this is horrible for every character, it makes it like, it doesn't have as much of a punch because it's like, oh, it only matters if it happens to Victor and Allison. Do you agree with that at all? Or
yeah, I can see that, and I'm kind of wondering if they had, if characters had individual writers that kind of shepherded them through each overall storyline.
Yeah,
that would make a lot of sense to me, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think because when you look at them in the comics, there's similarities there too. Like Vanya, the character, because Vanya has not become Victor in the comic at all. I think that's because of
No,
Elliot
and
Page.
Vanya is barely in volume 2 or 3. I mean, she's there, but she's definitely like kind of left behind. She's still recovering from the events of 1 in both 2 and 3. So
Yeah.
she is not a central figure in the comics beyond the first volume.
Yeah. And just talking about those differences, like the difference between like all the characters for the most part can seem goofy with the exception of Vanya and Allison in the comic. Like they have like a little bit of goofiness to all of them in the comic. However, Seance in the comic is like a lot more serious and it's just kind of more realistic and dark and depressing, his like kind of story arc in the comics. And I feel like when it translates over into the show, like the men are all kind of goofy and the female characters are the ones that are more serious. And then like if you look at the trade cover for volume 3 or the newest cover of it, it's Allison holding a house, and she's made all these doll houses for her daughter that she can't see. And I feel like that's such a serious thing that's in the comic and it translates well to the show. However, like every character in the comic can be kind of serious and stuff. I think the only one that's a little bit more goofy is Kraken, which is like Diego's namesake,
Wait, you think he's a little goofy in the comic?
He not like he's stupid or silly, but it's like he's the one that like if anyone's like a kind of a parody, it's him. He's kind of like the Wolverine type where he's like the badass.
Sure.
I don't think there's much more to him in the comic at least. I feel like he's the least developed of all the characters in the comic. What do you think?
Yes, I will agree with that.
Yeah. So I just think I think that all the characters in the show, they want to try to make them fun and stuff, but I think that with Elliot Page and the idea of like it being Vanya and then it became Victor, it's like that has a gravitas to it, and so we're going to treat that storyline with a little bit more seriousness and actual drama, and then with Allison, because she's African American in the show, and then she's part of this whole civil rights movement. We're like, oh, we're going to give it gravitas. Like I feel like season 2 really put the show on a trajectory, and it really solidified them as the serious ones. And then for the guys, it's like this kind of they're all kind of goofballs. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, maybe you could make the argument that Sloane's a little bit of a goofball here.
Okay.
So it's not like, and I don't want to like misgender Elliot Page at the same point, but you're right. Previously, absolutely. I agree with that statement. Otherwise,
yeah, very, very good point. That's right, Elliot Page. Right, good point. And some of the Sparrows were goofy, and then some were more serious too. But just one other point I want to bring up on this fucking rambling and ranting this morning is I think that, and this is in our notes, that like when you have a show where the world ends every season and where some characters will die in this season and then come back to life and stuff, I feel like that just lessens the impact and takes away the suspense, because it's like, oh well, this could be undone. And you kind of alluded to this when we were talking before of like how something could happen in one episode and then like an episode later it'll be different. And I feel like that's what happens, is that when we have shows like this, or shows in general, a death, or like when someone gets like really hurt, like Five's arm gets cut off, the reason why we do that is to show the character dealing with those consequences. But if you get rid of those consequences within an episode, I feel like it just takes away any kind of interesting stuff.
It's like when you read an X-Men comic and they're fighting some very powerful villain, but only Wolverine gets hit with the blast that would kill anybody.
Yeah.
It is kind of like that, and I think what would have went a long way for me in this season is that if they maybe would have actually killed some of the Umbrellas and left another of the Sparrows alive, another one or two there, just to have a mixture of them by the end, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and then maybe you still could have brought them back at the end, just to reset, I guess. But like, I think that would have been more interesting than just having them slowly take out the Sparrows and have the Umbrellas virtually fine the entire time.
Yeah.
Almost the entire time.
And I mean, like, what is that trying to say too? Because like the Umbrella Academy is sort of notorious for them all being like goof ups, or like them all having flaws, and the Sparrows are supposed to be these badass characters, and yet like the Sparrows are the one that are getting killed more frequently, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because even Harvey says in one of the earlier episodes, it's like, don't underestimate them, because even though they may seem like a bunch of screw ups, they did stop an apocalypse. Like,
yes.
So,
yeah, twice. Yeah. So, we've kind of talked about Harlan a little bit. One of the questions that we have written on here is that we find out that Harlan is the reason why the Umbrellas, or the Umbrella Academy mothers, are all dead in this timeline. Like, essentially, when they were going to get their powers, when they were going to be born, his mother died, and he like kind of connected to Vanya's power, and it was them, the mothers, having the power, and he like killed them accidentally. Did you feel like that was a satisfying answer to that mystery?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to it. It does seem a little too convenient. But I think if they would have tried to wrap in a more villainous plot to it, it may have been overstuffed in the season, I think, or overshadowed.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it makes sense, and really what it does is Harlan essentially exists to increase the rift between Victor and Allison.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is here.
Yeah.
And another interesting fact too, I wrote this in my notes like 3 times. In the comic, Luther and Five are actually brothers, and they have the same mother, obviously, because they're brothers. And in the show here, they make it seem like everybody had a different mother.
Oh yes, yes, that is a very good point. I remember reading that volume 3 of the comic, and one of the characters, the guy with the fishbowl head,
Yeah.
says, because he has a sibling, and I thought it was Allison at first, but then it's like, nope, it's
Yeah.
Luther. Yeah, that's cool. I like that twist. Yeah, the comic is so freaking different from this season, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think last season was very different. I mean, they had the same setting. They sort of had the backdrop of the JFK assassination,
Yes.
but that was a bit more central to the plot, I think,
Right.
in the comic than it was in the show.
Right.
And then the commission takes more of a center stage in the show rather than the book.
Yeah. Well, going along with that, do you think that they get notes from Gerard Way and it's like, this is where we're going in the comic, and they kind of mine that stuff? Or do you think it's like the Game of Thrones thing with like the producers that just had to kind of go on their own without the books being there?
I think, I mean, although I'm pretty sure Gerard Way and Gabriel Bá are both listed as producers or executive producers, I'm pretty sure that they have little say in what actually happens. I'm pretty sure this is treated like a business deal. It's like, hey, we're buying your rights to your thing here. We'll give you some vague creative influence or whatever, but we don't have to listen to you at all. And they just kind of go do their own thing. I mean, it's possible that maybe they have some kind of sign-off rights or something like that, but I really highly doubt that. And it's probably just like a, I can't think of the word. It's like I can't think of it. Why? My brain is broken.
Tell me what you're going for, and I'll come up with the word.
It's just a
transactional
title, I guess. Maybe I don't know if that works. Like they gave it to them just for the sake of giving it to them, and it doesn't really mean anything.
Okay, I see what you're saying. If that's the case, that makes a lot of sense about what's happened on this show, because
I feel like that's the case with most adapted shows. To be fair.
Okay. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Unless the original creator is actually writing or show running, it's a business deal. They sign away the rights to it, and they kind of take it and run with it in whatever direction they want for the most part.
Okay, that's interesting, because then it makes me wonder, like, well, why do they decide to go in the directions they do for the show? Like what is working for the show that people like a lot? And we've talked about this before. That, like,
I think you already said it.
What's that?
It's the personal relationships and the interpersonal drama that they bring to the characters. That's what is the big difference of the show from the comic, is there's a lot more of that in the show than in the comic.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, if that is the case, that explains why, like, the Hotel Obsidian in the show, which eventually I know they kind of call Oblivion or whatever, is so different from the comic. It's like so different,
Yeah, and the characters don't even go there really. I mean, Kraken and Spaceboy go there, Diego and Luther, but that's it. And they're barely there. We mostly see the hotel through the eyes of a villain, Dr. Terminal.
Yeah,
and, who's trying to take a baby away from its like crazy mother, who's like some weird ghost thing or something, or I don't even know what it was.
Yeah, the mother was this weird kind of creature where, like, she would look at an 8-ball and it would like change her, and she became this big hulking monster. I mean, the comic, like the villains and stuff in the comic, there's so many more villains in the comic, and they're so weird and creative that it's so much fun. And I guess it'd be kind of hard to translate them into a show, because it just doesn't work.
I do have to say that I do think Harlan took some visual cues from Dr. Terminal in the Hotel Oblivion comic.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I remember looking at the end of that trade, and like in the notes, it was either like Gabriel Bá or Gerard Way or somebody, or even maybe one of the editors, was saying how, like, Gerard Way comes up with these character ideas for these weird, quirky villains and stuff, and then they just kind of work it into the story. But he has like all these weird creations. Like there all these villains that you just don't see at all on the show. Like there's like the guys with the scarves. They're called like the Peppermint Scarves. Do you remember them?
No, I don't.
There's all these weird ass villains that come out of the because okay, so here's the deal. For those of you guys that are watching that like haven't read the comic, the Hotel Oblivion is essentially like a prison in another dimension that Hargreaves set up. It has nothing to do with the reset button. And there's all these weird ass villains that come out of there. There's like Medusa, which is like a robot head that's on a car, and like some guy was driving the car, and his son is the one that breaks into the prison and then gets the Medusa head and like puts it on his hand. So you have a guy that has like Medusa's head on his hand.
And that's a long-standing story plot that goes between at least volume 2 into volume 3. That the guy who runs that Perseus Corporation, he's trying to get in there to find his father.
Right.
And then, his father's already dead, so he takes his weapon that he had because he was a supervillain.
Right.
And that is not touched upon at all.
No way. There's nothing like that whatsoever. Yeah. So he's in there. Then they have that one guy that just like eats matter. I forget what his name is. Do you remember his name?
I do not.
Yeah. His name's like the Consumer or something like that. But it's a guy that just like basically eats all kinds of matter. He's real scary. He's in the first volume and he's in this one too. And then they have these criminal like thugs that they all have like scarves and they're called like the peppermint scarves and they just are like doing violence. But there's just a lot more villains than that too. And they're all kept in this prison. In the show, they kind of make it like there's essentially a portal to some kind of like almost like device or something that you could access that could change reality. And to me, like you could probably speak to this better than I could, but like it kind of reminded me of like Halo or something like that, where it's like there's like sort of like an elder race or something that can warp reality. And it's like Hargreaves wanted to get their stuff so he could bend reality to his will.
Yeah, that almost sounds more like Mass Effect than Halo to me. It's like there's the idea of a progenitor race that created everything, and then they can fix something if it gets broken,
right,
or destroy it at the same time. But yeah, that's actually a really good analogy.
Yeah, I mean, when they get in there, and that's in the final episode, he's kind of messing around with all this alien technology, and I figure that is playing off the idea that Hargreaves himself is an alien, which they like reveal, and they revealed it in the last season, but then they show it a lot more in this season. I mean, he literally kills Luther at one point with like his alien appendage, but that's like it's almost like they've made their own mythology for the show now. And I'm just kind of trying to piece together. It just seems like he's an alien that lost a woman that he loved or has feelings for. And he was aware of the power of the Umbrella children or the Sparrow children. And it was like they could be used to access this device that would make him manipulate reality so he could get powerful and have this woman too. Would you agree or am I off?
That's a great question, and I think a lot you have to tie into this storyline in the show where they're drugging Hargreaves,
right.
Which feels really weird, and I feel like it doesn't make that much sense.
Right.
So we find out that in the show, Pogo is alive somewhere else. He was fired by the Academy by Hargreaves because he didn't want to. Why did he get fired?
It's like he kind of caught on that Hargreaves is setting them up to be sacrificed.
Okay. So, but before he leaves, he gives the children medicine to kind of pacify Hargreaves. But I don't understand how they got him to take it or how they get him to keep taking it. It makes no sense.
Right.
Like it's like at the same time they're holding Hargreaves back, but they're still going to him for advice and leadership in some regard. So it kind of doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. And then running with that, that's another point we have in our notes too, which is that it kind of doesn't sync up with what happened in the Umbrella timeline too, because he like killed himself in the Umbrella Academy timeline. And it's like if he had this master plan to get into this Oblivion area where the reset is, like why would he kill himself? And the only logic I could make of that is maybe he's actually not dead in the original Umbrella timeline. He just
did he kill himself?
Yes. The show? So yeah, in the show and in the comic, they both say like that he killed himself essentially to like bring them all back together.
Interesting. Okay. I don't
Yeah.
remember that part.
Yeah, and like
Yeah,
one thing.
I don't know. Like, because I get what you're inferring here is that did he get specifically 7 children together so he can activate this machine?
Right.
I feel like that's not the case. I feel like he just knows about it, and I realize he sees that we're all fucked here because the reality is ending. This is our only shot. We happen to have 7 of you. Let's do it. Because if it was the other way around, I think he would have activated it a lot earlier.
That's a very good point. That's a very
Um,
good point.
and I
Yes.
think it's important to note in the comic, he out of the is it 43 children that are born on that same date,
Yeah.
he was
Something
only
like.
able to find or purchase adopt 7 of them. So he may not either A, know where all of them are, or B, been able to have acquired them all.
Okay.
So they don't really mention that at all in the show though.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's a really good point, though. Yeah. 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 He would have done it earlier. Good point. Yeah. Yeah. And so in the comic, like once again, another difference is that like that woman that I think we've even seen her in like season one. There was this really like one of the things that's cool about the show, and I think I mentioned this before, is that the opening cold open sequence before they say the Umbrella Academy. It's very much like Breaking Bad, where it's like you kind of don't know what's going on, or it might be kind of something strange, and it's like, well, how's this connected? And I remember that in like season one, they had this scene where it was him in the past, and he was talking to some woman who looked like she was maybe sick or something, and they looked out the window, and there was these like sparkles outside, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, what, what is this scene? But that woman has been like around the show, and she's even on the moon
Yeah,
where Luther's
but
watching.
that, I do not believe they showed that in previous seasons though. I think that was just shown in the flashback of this season that she was on the moon there.
Right. They showed her on the moon in this season, but then I think it's in the first season that you see him talking to her in like one of the opening sequences. And she says something like, the plan is beginning, or something cryptic like that.
I have to go rewatch that then. That's interesting. I mean, they definitely plant things in previous seasons and pick up on them later on. I feel like that woman there that we're talking about is definitely something they're going to touch on next season. They mentioned in terms of Ben, the Jennifer incident, and they mentioned
Mm,
it a couple times, and they showed a picture in Ben's room of her drawing the face of her face there, and then they don't bring it up again
mm-hmm.
at all. So, and I wouldn't put it past. I mean, even the alien aspect of Hargreaves, that wasn't in the final episode that they showed that. That was like towards the end, sort of, but it was just the end of an episode. They showed he was an alien, and then they don't bring it up again.
Yeah. Yeah. Since I rewatched it, like at the very last episode of the second season, he like pulls off his mask and you see the back of his head in the second
Oh,
season.
it is the very end of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then like he kills Luther in this season, and with a little like insect arm or whatever. But obviously there's differences between the comics and the show, and the show has become its own thing. And with that being said, like, what did you really enjoy out of this season? Like, what were the highs of the season for you?
Um, it is the interaction between the characters, and how they, just decide what to do or not to do. I feel like I feel like inaction is a big part of this show actually. Um, so it's interesting to me to see the motivations on why they want to do something or not do something, and then
Mhm.
the general drama and tension that brings. Um, you know, I think an example of that is, um, maybe how Luther he resents Hargreaves because he left him on the moon for 5 years, even though this Hargreaves doesn't know that.
Right.
Um, and he still is kind of sacrificed here to bring the team. That doesn't make sense. Never mind. I don't know what I'm talking about here. Um, I like the character interactions in the show, honestly, and like I said, why they're choosing to do what they're doing, and that's it.
Yeah. One thing. Okay. So one thing that's really good is that the characters, you can tell that they're siblings. Like they kind of have that sibling aspect to them. And I think I got what you were trying to say about like Luther, because they do kill Luther, or Hargreaves kills Luther to kind of make everyone go do his plan to go into the portal.
Because
Otherwise,
they voted to not do something, basically.
right, they voted to not save the world, and so by killing Luther, everyone went in and did his plan. And but yeah, as the show goes on, by the time you get to the third season, you're more used to them interacting with each other. And like Vanya was very distant from the whole group in the first season, but then Victor is a major part of this season. Like he is really with the group for like a really long time. In season 2, it's kind of interesting because they are so scattered and they have their own storylines, but yet they're always sort of referencing each other, and there's flashbacks to them being together. So like you still get that kind of like this family together, and you can tell like they miss each other. Like one of the things I actually liked about season 2 so much is that Allison's husband and other people would become aware of like her extended family, and it'd be like, oh well, she has this weird brother Klaus, and she has this gigantic brother, Luther, and it's just this kind of that dysfunctional family dynamic that I think you're getting at there that is the most appealing of the show. And I think that the individual characters are a lot of fun. I have to say that I don't actually like Luther that much. I think because he's like kind of too buffoonish for my take. He's definitely great.
I still do like Luther. I do. I actually really enjoyed the relationship aspect of this season with him, and I think this was the best season of his, honestly, for the show. The first season is absolutely not the best for him.
Yeah,
it might have gotten a little better in season 2, but that's not saying very much. And I think that this was the best use of him, honestly, in the show so far.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm not saying he was the best in the show, but this season was the best use of him overall, I think.
Yeah, I can see that because he is sort of like the intermediary between the Sparrows and the Umbrella Academy, and we see him kind of shift from like kind of being obsessed with Allison to he falls in love with Sloane. So yeah, I liked his and Sloane's interactions too. There's a couple other similarities between the comic and the show. One is at the Mothers of Agony, which Pogo was like a member of, and he was doing tattoos for them. They're in Hotel Oblivion, the comic, but just kind of used differently. And then besides that, there's also the idea of like Klaus or like Seance dying a lot in the comic. He gets shot straight in the head by one of the Mothers of Oblivion or Mothers of Agony in the comic, and then he comes back to life. And in this season, we finally see that he dies and comes back multiple times. And in the comic, when he dies, there's like a cowboy that you kind of assume is God because of the way that he's talking. But in the show, they have it to where it's like a girl on a bicycle.
Yeah. I think he actually dies in the first volume of the comic, though. Like, I think he gets shot in the head then, maybe. You know what? He's died a couple times, and I think that's just he realizes that's part of his power. He's like, oh, I guess I can't die.
Yes.
So I do like that they introduced that because in the show, because it did seem like he had previously had near-death experiences, and he really was only able to communicate with the dead. His power set does seem rather different in the comics than this. I guess you could make that argument for most of the characters, really.
Yeah. No, you're totally right, though. It's actually in the second volume that he gets shot in the head. He gets shot in the head by like Hazel or Cha Cha. They shoot him in the head.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like the show. If it comes back for a fourth season, I am on board. I'll watch it all and I'll talk about it all with you. I kind of feel like I said at the very beginning of this episode, that like the best of the show is like in the middle, like while the Sparrows are still around at the end, and then like right before they go to the 60s. I feel like that's the best part of the show. But I just really do like the characters a lot. Was there anything else you wanted to say about this season?
Oh man, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually did. Like I said in the beginning, I did enjoy the show this season. When I got to the middle here, I felt like I couldn't stop. I feel like I was satisfied by the end. I am very curious to see where everybody ends up. It seems like it's like a big reset. You mentioned, I think, like, how comics do that. They escalate, and then they just do a big reset so they can do it all over again. And it seems like that's what they're doing here. They're resetting a reality. They're starting from scratch. Everyone seems to be apart, and then they're all going to have to come back together to foil yet another apocalypse. Or maybe it's to foil Hargreaves this time. Who knows?
Mm.
But yeah, I really liked it. I didn't want to stop. I might even say this is my favorite season, honestly. I mean, I mean, I haven't watched two in a while. I know I like two way better than one.
Yes.
So I would definitely say that this is at least better than one by far.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, but yeah.
Yeah, I dig it. It makes me want to watch more of the show. It makes me want to read more of the comic. I love Gerard Way as a comic book writer. Kind of makes me even want to listen to My Chemical Romance a little bit. But yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the show. I'm really glad that you recommended we watch it and review it. I was going to say, so for next week, we're covering the first 4 episodes of Paper Girls. And then the following week, we're doing the final 4 because they all dropped on Amazon. And then
my favorite streaming model.
Yeah, I think that I've seen more and more articles saying how like that streaming model doesn't really work anymore, and people aren't interested.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, absolutely. If it's a show, if you're acquiring an existing show, put it all down. By all means, binge that stuff. But if you want to have a premiere show and have people talking about it, you can't drop it all at once. You just can't.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing how much I talk about ejaculating when we do videos, but like that's kind of what it feels like. Is like after you're done doing something, and then it's just like you feel different, and you don't even think about it again. That's what it feels like when you binge these things. It's kind of like, all right, well, that's all done and gone. Like, what's next? Whereas like when it's weekly, like our Disney Plus shows, then it's always on your mind. And so speaking of Disney Plus shows, then She-Hulk is in 3 weeks then, right?
Yeah, that'll start the 17th of August.
Okay,
so we'll do the first 4 Paper Girls next week. This coming Wednesday. The following Wednesday will be the back 4, and then the next will be the first episode of She-Hulk.
Cool. Well, that lets me keep doing what I love to do every single week. The highlight of my week is talking to my buddy Brian. You guys can definitely come. Thank you. You guys can definitely come join our discussion too. We love hearing what you guys say in the comments. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please do. We talk shit all. Dark Horse, Image, Marvel, DC. We love fucking comics. I'm wearing an Aquaman shirt in my bathroom. Let's go. Come join the show, and we will see you guys on Wednesday.